From Ticker, this is Black Belt Leader. Here's Karen Gately.
Welcome to Black Belt Leader, proudly powered by Miller Leith, recruitment specialist and career services provider. I'm Karen Gately, founder of Corporate Dojo. On our show today, we'll be talking about influencing how people are thinking, feeling, and behaving. Among the most important lessons I learned in the martial arts is that our capabilities add value only to the extent that we apply them effectively. Effective application is undeniably enabled by our mindsets, our emotions, and our behavioural choices. So joining us on the show to unpack the role leaders can play to support people to be at their best, mentally and emotionally, are Senn and Heidi. But let's first start by looking at some facts about our brains. Researchers have found 30 minutes of daily complaining can physically damage your brain. Even more interestingly, listening to somebody constantly complain also negatively impacts brain function. So contemplate for a moment how often the people in your business are undermining each other's well-being through complaints. Another fact, the happiness we feel when our team wins, in fact, lasts longer than our sadness when we lose. So that is clearly good news. But again, it reminds us why we need to keep showcasing our successes and drawing our team's minds to the things that are going well. Again, to reinforce those positive emotions. Our next fact is the brain processes physical pain the same way it processes rejection. So again, contemplate that. You know, how often do people feel unloved or rejected or not appreciated in your workplace? And what kind of pain, mental, emotional pain, is that actually creating? So a few things for you to contemplate there. But joining us now is Senn. Warren is the director of Lixivium Consulting, a psychologist, a mediator, and an executive coach. Warren, welcome to Black Belt Leader.
Yeah, good morning, Karen. How are you?
I'm well, thank you for being here. Warren, I know you've got a great deal of experience working with leaders and organisations around influencing mindsets and behaviours. In your experience, how does our mind and our emotions influence performance?
There's absolutely no doubt that our attitude, the positivity we're able to summon, and most importantly, our level of resilience feeds into our ability to perform and especially deal with a crisis as it unfolds. Now, one of the things that I'm seeing with the leaders that I'm working with at the moment, who are talking to me about how they've managed through the COVID crisis, has really been, there's been three distinct phases for them that they've had to quickly navigate through. You know, in the first instance, they had to help people overcome the sheer stress and anxiety of going from being able to work and not being able to work, and cope with rapid change and these feelings of being out of control. And then they had to help them practically set up to work from home and then hopefully now focus on maintaining those relationships. But through all of that, it's our attitude that has really determined how we've been able to cope with that and not cope with that. So that message of positivity and affirmation that you will get through this, we will get through this, has been really important from a leadership perspective.
That's fantastic. And, you know, in your experience, how important is it that leaders are doing that on a one-to-one basis versus, you know, their whole team and group communications?
Oh, look, it's absolutely critical that you tailor your messaging and you tailor your approach for each individual person with different styles, different personalities. But if I come up for one level, and I think there's a really important message for all leaders to remember, people have two fundamental drivers, and those drivers never change across the entire course of your life. And the first driver is people want to be understood.
Yes.
Who am I? What matters to me? What is my style? What do I lie awake and think about at night? And the second important driver is people want to feel valued and appreciated. And if as a leader and a manager, you're not touching on one of those two buttons on a regular basis, your team and the individual will be disengaged. So you have to understand your person on a personal level.
Yeah, totally agree. So obviously when we're working remotely, you know, what are some of the things you're seeing leaders do well to, again, maintain that sense of I am understood, there's empathy, you know, people understand what I'm struggling with, and I can continue to contribute?
That's a really good question, Karen. And I think what I've seen work really well is we shift away from a purely operational focus where it's about getting work done. And the good teams that I see operating now start with a check-in of how you're going, what's happening at your home. You know, were you able to get toilet paper? Have you been to the supermarket this week? That really, really practical and personal. You know, you had a birthday party on the weekend. How did you manage to celebrate that when no one can come to your house?
Yeah.
So we're really personalising experience. But most importantly, more importantly than anything else, giving space for people to say, this is how I'm feeling,
Yes, totally.
before you move on to task.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
the work gets done. When the relationship is strong, people feel connected and engaged, they will give you discretionary effort. There's no question about that. Yep.
Totally agree. Look, in my view, discretionary effort is quite simply what people choose to do because they want to,
Yes.
not because they feel
Absolutely.
obligated to.
No, absolutely.
Totally agree.
Yes.
So when it comes to leaders understanding, so obviously you've pointed out that we need to understand each human that we are leading in order to directly influence them. What are some of the tools or techniques leaders can use to get to know people on this level? You know, how do they think? How do they feel?
Yeah, look, that's really good. And you'd like to think that they put time into developing the relationship over time. But you know, once again, to come back to fundamental principles, if you're looking for the masterclass or the black belt version of how to lead, really good managers, really good leaders decouple the positive reinforcement and the valuing of the person from what they do to how you feel about them.
Yeah.
So we work together on the basis of that. There are a whole range of things you need to do for me and complete from a work task perspective. But whether you do a brilliant job or an average job, our relationship never changes. So my desire for you to be successful, my desire for me to understand you is independent of the work you do.
Yes.
Because if the two things are connected, the message that the team member can sometimes get is, I only value you when you do work for me. And my reward and recognition is only linked to productivity and output, which there's a level at which it is.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about relationships that are based on trust, that's not how it works.
No.
And, you know, my silly example is you imagine having a partner at home where you come home and say, I'm only going to love you if you empty the dishwasher. It just wouldn't work.
Do you think?
Well, possibly.
There's no
That's a
give that
message
one
I
a
get.
go.
Yes.
Look, I totally agree, and it reminds me very much of the role of sensei, you know, in the martial arts, where we're on your side as your sensei. Even when you're struggling, even when you're not your best self, we will serve you faithfully. And sometimes that includes giving you tough love and helping you to see reality and holding up the mirror. But we won't give up on you, and we won't judge you harshly for not being enough and not being good enough. So.
It's absolutely true. Yeah, just the other thing too, Karen, in terms of influencing people and feeling connected, one of the things we sometimes, or the mistake we sometimes make as a leader and a manager, we assume that people make logical, rational decisions about how they work, who they connect with, what they focus on.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an absolute myth. You know, we are far more emotional beings than we are rational beings.
Absolutely.
If you think about all of the emotional decisions you make across the course of your life, you know, going on a roller coaster, jumping out of a plane, falling in love, taking a 30-year mortgage, you know, buying a car that's $500,000, they are not rational decisions.
They're not.
So if you're purely looking to motivate and engage with people based on logic and rationality, I'm not saying don't have any of it, but you're really going to miss an opportunity to connect people where they really are.
Yeah, I love that.
And to strip that back even further, if you can only focus on one thing, I would recommend you focus on building trust.
Yes.
And trust comes from consistency of behaviour and the integrity behind the person giving the message.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you could instill a one quality in all leaders, that's what you'd want. You'd want them to be trustworthy. Yes. and work from a basis of ethics and integrity.
Yeah.
And think about this on a global level in terms of how poor our leadership is. That's the component that's missing.
Totally agree. It's that character strength, it's that integrity, as you say. And
Sure.
in my experience, that trust equation is everything when it comes to influence. Because the reality is that ability to influence, again, how we're talking today about to influence how people are thinking, feeling, or behaving, they actually have to let you.
Yes.
And if they don't trust you,
true.
they're unlikely
Yes.
to do that consciously or otherwise.
Absolutely true. And can I say too that we often get sucked in by the myth of competence. We assume that people are who are really technically gifted or highly sophisticated at something, and it could be a actor or a musician or someone very powerful. Being technically competent doesn't make you a good person, doesn't make you someone that you would look up to as a leader. And there's history's littered with those examples.
There's a few current
So,
ones.
yeah. So competence doesn't mean you should trust someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look,
Got to
I
watch
agree.
out. Yeah.
I agree. I think in most instances, people want to know the leader that they're following is capable enough, that they're not
True.
incompetent, but ultimately
True.
what's
Yes.
going to really cause them to invest and push hard and go beyond the call of duty, as we were saying before, is that I trust and respect the human that's in charge here. Totally agree.
And can I just answer one other question you answered before? How do you connect with people? How do you show them that you're trying to understand them? I think if you're giving one consistent message to your team members over and over and over again, and it sort of almost doesn't matter how you deliver the message so long as they understand it. The message is, you matter to me.
Yes.
Your life, your interests, your hobbies, your career matters to me, and I will do what I can to facilitate that. You don't have to get it right, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes as a leader and a manager. We all do. But if you keep telling people that and keep trying to act on that principle, you will come out in front in terms of your team members and how engaged they are with you.
Totally agree. So my question to you now is, what happens if I don't really care about you and I'm your leader? And, how do I develop empathy in a real sense? How do I actually connect with these people and care enough to come across as authentic and real and the type of leader we want people to believe we are?
That is a fantastic question, because if you're managing 6 people, you're probably going to connect with 3 or 4 of them really strongly, and there might be 1 or 2 where, whether it's a value set or a personality difference, but there'll be some point where you just can't connect with them. And I think one of the things you can do from an integrity point of view is, when you're managing a team for the first time, when you're leading a team, you sit down with them and say, this is what I believe in. These are my priorities. This is how I like to work. These are the things I believe to be important. These are my values. And here's the things I won't compromise. So when you do have a disagreement, you can come back to those statements of principle and expectation and just accept that there will be difference.
Yeah.
But equally, when you compromise this, you're going to hear from me.
Yeah.
So you've set the expectations up front, and you acknowledge that some people will be closer to you than others, and that's okay. But I go back to rule number 1. I disagree with you, but I'm always going to try to help you.
Yes. Yep.
And that's where you have to be the bigger person, I think, as the leader.
Yes.
You have to make the sacrifice rather than your team member.
Yes. Because at the end of the day, it's our job to enable that person to be the best possible version of themselves. So we
Absolutely.
don't need to, be keen to be their best buddy, but we do need
Yes.
to serve them faithfully. We do need to enable them to be successful, and as a starting point, empathise with at least the challenges they face.
True. Now, if I was looking for one measure of a good leader, just to boil it down to one characteristic, my 25 years of experience tells me this is true. I think when you spend time with a good leader, whether it's 5 minutes or 5 hours, you walk away richer for that experience.
Yeah.
Either in terms of how you feel about yourself, what you understand in terms of process, or some point of clarity that person's given you. But you are richer for that rather than being drained.
Yes.
So good leaders build up the people around them.
Lauren, I really appreciate it.
No problem. Yep.
Sorry, we cut you off there.
No problem.
Before we let you go anywhere, we are now going to turn to our WTF segment. This is where we ask our guests to share their views on crazy workplace scenarios.
Okay.
Say what?
So Warren, this is from an HR manager online. A single-use bathroom is intended for just that, to be used by one person at a time. Two people should not be occupying the single-use bathroom for 30 minutes each day at lunch. Oh, and by the way, it's also inappropriate to make out in your car in the parking lot in full view of people, including directors walking by. So before we ask Warren his views, I want to share another fact with everybody, and that is apparently being in love is biochemically the same as having a severe obsessive compulsive disorder.
Wow.
So Warren, what are your views? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I have to say I sort of somewhat agree in the sense that it's one thing to do what you want, but, you know, I think it's fair and reasonable that other people would expect you to understand the impact you have on them.
Yeah.
So if you're occupying the bathroom for 30 minutes and someone else can't use it, that doesn't strike me as fair. So, you know, by all means, live your life, do what floats your boat, but at the end of the day, consider other people too.
Absolutely.
That should be the rule of thumb.
You know, the particular example we're talking about, I've actually dealt with an issue where the person actually sneaking off to the bathroom with a colleague was in fact the CEO.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
what's that likely to do for character reputation?
Oh, my God. Well, I've just got to say two words, Donald Trump.
Fair call.
Yes. I don't need to explain.
Yeah. Oh,
Destroys culture.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes.
So again, we really appreciate all of your wisdom being shared with us today, as well as obviously insight to some of the crazy things that people should just choose not to do in the workplace.
Absolutely true.
Thanks
for having me. All right, take care.
So next we're joined by Heidi Rogers. Heidi is our regular psychotherapist. Heidi's been providing advice and counselling to groups and organisations for many years in both Australia and the US. So we're going to go to a short break, and when we return, Heidi will be with us.
There are now more ways to watch Ticker. Download our apps for Apple and Android devices. We're live on Twitter and YouTube Live. And you can catch us on Amazon Alexa and Google Home. Head to the Ticker website for more.
Our partner Miller Leith was founded in 2012, and over the past 7 years has carved out a name synonymous with true partnerships and quality outcomes. You may know them by the blue couch logo, it's catchy. Based in Melbourne and Sydney, their focus has always been centred around true partnership with industry sectors and job groups, where they have key expertise such as FMCG, retail, supply chain, engineering, quality, sales and marketing, HR and business support. Miller Leith offers talent search for permanent and contracting roles, and they also have expertise with career transition. If you're looking for an authentic talent partnership, call Miller Leith today.
From Ticker, this is Black Belt Leader. Here's Karen Gately.
Welcome back to Black Belt Leader. We're now joined by Heidi Rogers. Heidi, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's good to be back.
Thank you. So let's start with your views on our WTF at work topic of the day. Did you read it before? Were you online?
Yeah, I just saw that, the bathroom incident and people make car, yes.
Exactly right. So what's your view? I mean, how often do you hear of people making these kinds of really crazy decisions in the workplace, like sneaking off to the bathroom with a colleague?
People are amazing. I'm never surprised. There's never a dull moment that I ever experience at work, or hearing clients tell me the stories, because I hear those stories often from clients about the sexcapades in the bathrooms or things happening in the parking lot. I hear all about those stories. I don't know. I agree with your guest before of just be respectful of other people, I think. And especially if you're in a position of leadership, you gotta take that job seriously and model, I think, a lot of the kind of behavior you want your staff to emulate. So yeah,
absolutely. And I think a big message to anyone watching who is tempted or does participate in those kinds of behaviours is to not think that people can't see you. You know, I think sometimes people think they're 2-year-olds
100%.
standing behind the curtain, you know, and no one can see their feet. But the challenge is sometimes when those kinds of relationships are going on, people can feel it, let alone see it.
100%. Yeah. People who think they have a sneaky office relationship, it's like with The Office, you know, everyone knew that they were an item, you know, Pam, and I'm forgetting his other name. Anyway, but yeah, with The Office, everyone knows when you're having a sneaky relationship, you're not fooling anyone.
Exactly. Good advice, thank you. So let's turn our minds to the topic of the day, and obviously that's around how leaders can influence people's thoughts, emotions, actions. Again, just to kick off from that, you know, how do you believe leaders can have the biggest impact on people's emotional and mental state?
I think, well, it first has to come from a place of safety, because if you want to impact people, you can't impact them unless they feel safe. So safety is kind of number one. You can't get people's brains in a position to learn or to be open to anything that you have to say if they don't feel safe. So safety is definitely number one. Beyond that, you want to sort of reward against behaviors that are armoring. So things like blame, shame, cynicism, perfectionism, having that kind of an attitude as a leader, that's where you don't want to go, you don't want to be rewarding armoring behavior.
Yes, absolutely agree with you. So, you know, again, when we reflect on leaders' influence, when somebody is really fixed in their mindset, they're really fixed in their thinking, what can a leader do about that? You know, obviously we don't want to get into an argument. We don't want to start being sarcastic because someone hasn't been listening to our ongoing advice. Yeah. So when people really are fixating or stuck in a place, what can leaders do about that?
Again, going back to safety, that if you want to be able to convey to someone, hey, I think you kind of have a blind spot in this particular area, or I think you're not really getting, say someone's had feedback that you're unapproachable and nothing is really shifting, and to get them to hear you and to listen to what you have to say. They're not going to listen if they don't feel safe, but also that they can be vulnerable with you. And to be vulnerable with you, you have to be vulnerable with them, right? So it can't be that I'm just going to come at you and say you need to do da 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 da. I have to interact with you in a way that makes you feel safe, and often the best way to do that is through being vulnerable, connection, empathy, validating how they feel. And so to do that requires you to step on that side of the fence, to display those behaviors. You can't be expecting someone to reflect and get vulnerable about, wow, the ways that I suck as a leader, the ways that I suck as an employee. They're not going to do that if they don't feel safe with you. So you have to, and what the analogy I like to use is come alongside. So rather than me sitting opposite you as leader and team member, and I'm sort of telling you what you're doing wrong or what you need to improve on, I come and sit along next to you, and we put the problem in front of both of us rather than in between us.
It's very much that coaching role, isn't it? It's rather than being the boss and the dictator and the controller, it's I'm going to sit alongside next to you, as you've pointed out, be your partner in crime in solving this challenge.
Yes. And I think feedback should be vulnerable for both people. So if I'm giving you feedback, or you're receiving the feedback, both of us are feeling highly vulnerable. It's not that I'm in this, tough position and I'm going to make you, listen to what I have to say. It's that we come alongside each other, both feeling the strain of having those awkward conversations.
One of the most powerful things I think I was taught by a mentor many years ago was how to say to somebody, I'm just trying to save you from yourself, and say it in a way that actually allows them to actually understand the sincerity of your efforts to allow them to be better. And I've actually rolled out that expression a few times, and without exception, people have actually said, thanks. It's been like a moment of confusion. That's what I'm hearing you talk about, is let's be empathetic. We don't have to be a walkover, but absolutely let's have conversations that allow people to be better.
And it always, I think, comes back to comfort over hard conversation. So a lot of leaders will say, I don't want to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to hurt them. But being clear is kind.
Yes.
Being unclear is unkind. And
Totally
so
agree.
being direct with people and sacrificing my comfort, put that to the side so I can have a hard conversation with you that will help you grow, help the business grow and flourish.
So we're playing on the side visuals here some footage of people really losing their minds at work. It's not hard to find on YouTube, lots of examples, you know, of people doing things like smashing in the photocopier or their computer screen, throwing it over the other side of the petition. What can leaders do when people really are being hypersensitive, or clearly the examples we're showing would be straight through the keeper job loss kind of scenarios. But, you know, let's take it one step back from that kind of conduct. If people are just being hypersensitive, what can leaders do about that?
Well, hypersensitivity and anger and angry outbursts like this dude with the printer, that comes from a place of anxiety, actually. It's the same part of the brain that anxiety is responsible for, which is the amygdala, which is where the fight, flight, freeze response comes from. So if you have someone who's being angry and showing the fight response, it means you got to go back to the amygdala, and the amygdala is all about safety. So again, like this guy who's destroying the printer and the computer obviously has hit a limit point where he's feeling a lot of pressure or something. So if you want to keep people from getting to that explosive state, or the hypersensitive person who maybe tends to go inward and kind of collapses when they get criticized or get feedback, the best thing to do is to create a clear understanding of everyone in the business of what our values are. And so by doing a values exercise where you go through individuals, what their individual values are, and then the organization's values, if we're all kind of on the same page before we get to a moment like that, then when that moment happens, I can pull, you know, Brian over there up and I can say, hey, Brian, bud, what are you doing? Like, you know that this isn't one of our values. Like, you know that one of our values in this organization is safety and, you know, honesty or trust or something like that. And it's hard for people to trust you or to feel safe around you when you're being violent and aggressive. And sometimes people might need to, you know, come and see someone like me and come see a professional to help unpack what's going on a deeper level if their behavior is that out of control. And sometimes just having a conversation from a really empathetic, compassionate leader is sufficient. And I've seen lots of situations like that in workplaces where the leader and the employee have a really close relationship, and the employee is willing to take feedback from their leader or their manager. Sometimes they're not. And so I guess, how do you create a relationship though where they are willing to take on what you have to say? Vulnerability, safety, empathy, compassion, all of those kind of beautiful traits. It's not the hard ones. Everyone thinks it's like when I whip my staff and I yell at them, and nobody has ever changed behavior by being shamed or belittled, ever. Totally agree. That just doesn't work that way. It actually has the inverse effect. When people feel shamed and belittled, it makes them feel they're incapable of change. So so I think going back to, I like doing values exercises when I work with businesses to get we all are on the same page. I also find out what's important to everyone, their individual values, and then we can kind of use that to frame the rules, I guess, of the workplace and what behavior is not acceptable.
Fantastic, Heidi. Really appreciate your insights again, sharing all your wisdom. And we look forward to having you again next time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So in terms of key messages for today, I really do encourage everyone watching to hear loud and clear from our guests that the starting point to enable people to be at their best around their thinking, their emotions, their behaviours is in fact your character. So have a good hard look in the mirror. How are you engaging? How are you turning up every day? And to what extent are you creating an environment and a culture that allows you to have tough conversations when you need to, and to influence people's ability to step up? So thanks for joining us. If there are topics you would like us to explore, please get in touch via our website, corporatedojo.com, or any of our social media channels. And remember, you choose. Will you be an ordinary or an awesome leader of your people?
There are now more ways to watch Ticker. Download our apps for Apple and Android devices. We're live on Twitter and YouTube Live. And And you can catch us on Amazon Alexa and Google Home. Head to the Ticker website for more.